afternoon. Thank you all for joining us again for the Self-Build Hour. We're really excited to be presenting this format to you. As you're aware, we started this format so that we can provide self-build information to you in the comfort of your own home. These sessions will be recorded, so after the session, you'll have the opportunity to review them on demand at your convenience. But likewise, in joining the presentation now, you have the additional opportunity of asking questions to the presenter. So I'd like to start off today just by going through a few logistics. So we've got a Q&A section within the meeting, and you can ask any questions of our presenter today through that Q&A. Likewise, if you have trouble accessing that, feel free to pop those questions in the chat. Throughout the presentation today, we will also be providing some links to resources that may be useful for you when you go back through and review this again. So we'll make those accessible to you. We would encourage you to put in your questions early so that when Tom finishes his talk, we'll be able to ask those questions directly. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. So we're being joined today by Tom McSherry. He is from the BuildStore, and many of you will probably already be familiar with his work at the HBR talks and at the NSBRC. And we're really pleased to have him join us today. He's got nearly 30 years in the financial services industry, and over half of that time is specializing in mortgages and finance, specifically for new builds and extensions. So Tom's also, in addition to his work in the financial sector, has completed 2 major home building projects himself. So he's widely regarded in the self-build industry as an expert, and he's here to help you continue your self-build journey and give you all the advice you need to have on both finance and protecting your project. So without further ado, I will let Tom take over.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining you today not from AC Architects' office. I'm actually just the other side of the river in South Queensferry, and delighted to join you and hopefully share over the next hour some key areas to focus on when you're embarking on a self-build project. There's a schedule of works, of course, that you'll map out, and Jenny and the team will tell you there's never enough Gantt charts on a construction project. Well, there's a Gantt chart that should happen before you get to the point of construction, and that's part of that is the finance element, and I'm going to focus on that today and hopefully share a screen with you that should allow us to do so. Jenny, you can let me know, but hopefully you've got a nice clear screen that everyone should see.
Yes, that all looks great.
The presentation. Fabulous. Well, let's get underway and focus on the agenda that I want to go through. Probably the start point, and unusually many people leap ahead to design before working out the budget. But the starting point for any construction project should always be budget. I would implore you not to be spending vast sums of money to design a house that ultimately you can't afford to build. And working with an architect, part of their questions to you will be, what is your budget? Well, make sure that it's qualified. Make sure it's from a lender who supports the sector, not just a general mortgage calculator. We'll look at the types of projects. I think that's quite important. We often talk about self-build mortgages, but the lenders that support the sector, regional building societies, it's stage payment mortgages for self-build, but equally to convert barns, to change offices to residential, to extend your family home, to renovate it. So it's a stage payment mortgage that's used for all of those project types, and we'll look at some examples. We'll look at working out your costs, and I think never has been a more important point at the time to focus on design and construction. There is no doubt with this energy crisis that we've all been going through, that the self-build industry has for many years led the way in environmental credentials in terms of building houses that have a much reduced impact on the environment. Of course, many times that will be using off-site manufacturing, and there is incredible support for off-site manufacturing. But what the lenders are particularly interested in is the palette of materials that we choose to wrap the building in. And we'll look at some examples. Then we'll look at the key thing for any project, which is cash flow. When the money arrives on site is the really important part from our perspective, from an advice journey. And from your perspective, it's the part that allows you to pay everyone on time. We'll then give you a basic understanding of stage payment mortgages and how they differ from that vanilla residential mortgage that we'll have used to buy houses or remortgage. And then look at some of the keys in terms of successful project. And as Jenny has rightly said, we're happy to spend as much time as you need on Q&As. And if we run over, please feel free to email me. Happy to take any questions as we move forward. So what type of projects do stage payment mortgages support? Well, a couple of good examples here. Converting barns. Obviously we have the planning legislation, the Q planning legislation that allows us to change what was a residential building into a residential home under permitted development rights. So that's, again, one of the stage payment. The stage payment mortgages will provide support to purchase and convert the barn. Property extensions, renovating an old property that's not deemed habitable. Actually, one is knockdowns and rebuilds, often taking an old derelict building, demolish it, and create a brand new property to be set on that particular site. Self-build, of course. Development finance, where it may not be for your primary main residence. So building to let, building to sell. And certainly probably one of the most exciting areas from a development perspective is the evolution of the custom build sector, which has primary legislation in England, the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act, where probably more of a de-risked journey, where a developer enabler will be putting in roads and services and can partner with you to engage on design. And of course, AC architects have been involved in this sector for quite some time from a very early stage. Along. So we start with budget. Often we will have a customer arrive with a fabulous design drawings for a house that's too big in terms of what they can afford to build. And what you should never have to do is reverse engineer the process or leave yourself short of funds. So let's start nice and early. And I mentioned these incredibly supportive building societies. What they do is they provide BuildStore with calculators that allows us at an early stage to work out how much you can borrow. Please be aware that's a free service. Don't allow anyone to charge you to do a basic budget calculation. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it involves working out from your income and your outgoings how much the lenders will allow you to borrow, plus your savings. And what that does is give us that gross pot that delivers the project. If you already own your site or property, then that gets split into two components, your professional fees and your construction costs. If you're looking to find that plot or that property, it's three pots. It's the pot to secure the project, your professional fees, and your build costs. So let's calculate that really early in the process. And please share it with your architect. I hear clients saying, I don't want to tell the architect my full budget in case to spend it. Well, kind of that's exactly what you should be doing. Let them know the parameters so that they're designing the house with the budget in mind. How much you can borrow? Well, the reality is it's not very much different to what you would on a traditional house buying process. The lenders will allow you to, looking at your income and your affordability, calculate that loan amount. But as a percentage, this is where we're really starting to see the flexibility and the support that these regional build societies provide. Because we now have products at 95% of the funds to buy the project and 95% of the construction costs of the stage payment mortgage. Now, the reality is what that has the ability to do is change the demographic of self-build. Why are first-time buyers not being given the opportunity with lower level deposits to commission and design their own home? Why are they being railroaded into the new build marketplace? Let's give them more choice. So, great flexibility in terms of percentages, and let's work out the budget nice and early. are the costs associated? And now this is important. And I mentioned the three pots: the project, the land, the fees, and the construction costs. But it's also important to understand that there are unexpected expenses. No one sets out on a project to get it wrong. And it tends not to be a catastrophic change in budget that happens. If it is, it's likely to be in very complicated ground conditions. Otherwise, it can be a gradual creep that happens. There's no doubt. I mean, as I said, I'm a self-builder. It's a very emotive thing to do, but it's important once you set the budget to try and keep the reins on the budget and don't let it creep. It's important we consider ongoing living costs. This is an affordability model. You are allowed to have two mortgages at the same time: your current residential home and your self-build mortgage. Both primary residential mortgages, the flexibility I'm going to describe, but you're allowed to have two, which of course means you can stay in your current home with that small deposit and allow you to transition into your new home, selling your old home afterwards, preventing that rented position and preventing going on site in the caravan. But it's important. And equally, you're allowed to be renting at the same time, but we need to consider that rent as a cost and an outgoing. You'll probably start to hear a theme about the flexibility that these lenders provide to us. And some good examples of that would be, as we've had a run on interest rates in the last 12 months. It's great to see today that the Bank of England base rate stuck exactly where it was. But the lenders on the stage payment mortgage have given us a concession of interest only during the purchase and the construction phase. Great flexibility, helping affordability. But they've also now offered us a facility that if you want to stay in your current home or rent, and you have some additional savings, if you can allocate savings to cover the rent of the mortgage for 12 or 18 months, then they will ignore that commitment. That can often allow you to borrow more and enable you to build the dream home. Daily, weekly, monthly, I think is really important because there are milestones on a construction project, which is securing the property. Example, foundations going in, superstructure up, wind and watertight, first fix and plaster, second fix and completion. My own journey, and for both of them, I had milestones because I used an off-site timber frame system and it has bespoke payment terms. But I paid the tradespeople weekly. Now, you pay them on the Friday, they come back on the Monday. If you don't pay them, they might not come back on the Monday, they might not come back for 3 months because they'll go and do someone else's job who does pay them on time. So please, that will take stress out of it if you can create the structure with the finance to meet the demands of that granular level of outgoings and payments required. And those same tradespeople, I'd be down at the builders merchants making sure that materials are on site to keep the project alive and keep it moving forward in a timely manner. Why is the design and the construction important when it comes to finance? Here's a couple of very good examples to the side. Both of these are timber frame. The top one was a stunning project that AC designed. It's, if my memory serves me right, it's near Dr. Arder up near Glen Eagles. In fact, part of the house, I think it might even be generating income for the customer. Both timber frame, both looking very different. And of course, they're very traditional by nature of a brick sky on the outside. But of the top image, it would go 100% timber cladding top to bottom. But in the bottom example, that's a black Tata steel, both on the outside of the timber frame and as a roof material, because it's next to an agricultural building, and the planning department wants it to have a similar theme to the building adjacent to it. What happens as a result, not of the fact that it's a SIPS or a timber frame system, but the fact that the cladding is non-traditional by way brick and block, and it's a lightweight cladding for the whole of the superstructure, then the likelihood is we might have gone from 60 products to 5 to 10 products. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't support the project. Quite clearly, we can support the project. And in fact, when I look back, the reason I did a self-build is I didn't want to compromise anymore. Renovating and converting properties brings its own challenges, and you're often working within the fabric of the existing building. The opportunity to commission and design your own home was quite empowering for me. And if I wanted the top or the bottom project and had fewer products, actually that wouldn't concern me. The fact is, we do have choice. The reason I highlight it is be aware of the decisions at an early stage and engage with us, because we can make you aware of the decisions you're making on design and how it impacts on the number of lenders that will support the project. So how do these mortgages work that generate the cash flow that ensure we can meet daily, weekly, milestone, monthly payments on a project? I think it's worthwhile going back, looking how the market originally evolved, which was through arrears-based valuation stage payments. Effectively, the customer, and going back 25 plus years ago, lenders often wouldn't lend on land and actually wouldn't give you any money until the value of the site had increased. Now, what that was doing was strangling the market from only being available to the well-heeled third and fourth time house mover with deep pockets. It clearly was stopping the market evolving. Even more so, when it's based on valuation after the stage is completed, and you only get funds if the value goes up. Well, who's in control of the project? It's not us, it's not the architect, and it's not you. It's the valuer who was sent out from the lender, who will be revaluing at every stage, and only if the value goes up in line with the spend do you receive funds back. Now, that problem becomes amplified if we're doing a renovation, extension, or an old barn conversion. Because stage one, we rip the property apart. The roof comes off, the windows come out, and we're no longer wind and watertight. We will have a decrease in value because the early stages is destruction rather than construction. As a result, that product has some fundamental flaws. We can, however, use it on occasions. When can we use it? Well, if you already own your project, and if the value doesn't go up, you have sufficient funds available, and I would say considerable funds available, to continue to fund from your own means. Because at no point do you have the certainty what you're receiving at each stage. Now, we knew that that was an issue, and back in 1998, BuildStore went about designing a suite of products that changed the whole situation. Those products are now at 85 to 95% of costs of the plot or the build, 89% of construction, 85 to 95% construction costs. And if you already own your project, you can receive 100% of your construction costs. The key is the stage payments are guaranteed based on the costs that you incur, not based on its value. The value goes out on day one and tells us the project value on day one, and based on the drawings and the plans, they'll tell us the end value of the project. The problem comes in the parts in between. If we need the value to increase the value and it's not increasing in line with the spend. The cost-based product, effectively we get a detailed breakdown of your costs, and at every single stage you are guaranteed to have your funds, either when the stage is finished or, importantly, when the stage is about to begin. And I'll tell you where that becomes particularly useful. As I highlighted earlier, we've now funded somewhere close to around 28,000 projects, which are mapped out across the right-hand side here, as you'll see. Cost-based in arrears will provide 95% of the cost of the land in the build, providing those guaranteed stage payments. If you're working with a contractor, custom build's a very good example, or a main contractor who needs paid at a particular point, a milestone, then those costs can be tailored to those stages, and there is a guarantee that the payment will take place when that stage is completed. Even if there's no increase in value, in fact, most of our lenders now don't even require an interim valuation to occur. They will come out at some key points, perhaps wind and watertight. It's simply an inspection to check that the project is progressing. Quite clearly, that's a lower risk strategy, and it creates certainty and keeps you in control of the project. The advanced stage payment model does exactly the same, up to 95% of the purchase price of the land or property and build costs. Again, guaranteed stage payments. But where does that work particularly well? Well, as I already highlighted, in AC Architects, as a passive designers as well, many clients are embracing that example I showed earlier, off-site manufactured systems such as insulated concrete form, structurally insulated panels, timber frame, modular steel. Of course, many will still lean back to the traditional brick and block. But what's unique about off-site manufacturing as you're designing a bespoke house that only fits on your foundations. As a result, you have to pay before it leaves the factory. The payment model normally sits on 10% to put it into the design, 40% to put it into the manufacturing process, and most or all of it to be paid for before it leaves the factory. Now, if we put a set of foundations in that won't increase the site value, and we now have to pay for an off-site manufactured system which won't add any value, then clearly we're front-end loading the cash flow. That's why the advanced stage payment accelerator mortgage was created, because we can provide the payment before the stage is due, enabling you to pay for the pounds even if there's no increase in value, and enabling you to pay the terms required by your off-site manufacturer system, dramatically again reducing risk and creating flexibility. So which one of the mortgages is right for you? Well, no two projects are the same. Every project's cash flow is tailored specifically. If you have considerable funds and you can afford to build a project to wind and water site, we will tailor the cash flow so that you only need the funds towards the back end. If you need it earlier and you prefer to keep the savings, we will tailor it specifically to those requirements. I think what's really important is you need to be dealing with a specialist. A specialist that's got access to the widest range of products and lenders in the marketplace. Not a limited panel, not one or two lenders, but to every single lender and product to make sure that you're getting access to the right one. Go direct to a lender, of course, is an option, but they can only give you the options and products that they have from their own suite. So speak to an independent specialist who has access to the whole of the market. I mentioned changing the demographics and reducing the age group for people commissioning and designing their own home and bringing that age group down. But quite clearly, and I am marching towards the next category, which is those heading towards retirement who may not have 20, 25, 30 years mortgage term availability. And in fact, they're about to get into a period in life where your income reduces in retirement. That's clearly an issue from a lending perspective under the traditional self-borrowed mortgage route. However, we have a suite of products that are asset-based lending. And a good example would be someone who has a property that's unencumbered, it's rather expensive to run now because of its age and maybe an older style heating system. And every time it breaks, it's a fortune to maintain. Splitting the garden is quite often an option for many, where they want to build something that is far more responsible in terms of its thermal performance and suited to their lifestyle going forward. So we can take a charge over the current house, this big asset, even an income poor situation, and provide stage payments to build the new one, selling the old one at the end and paying it off. Now, be aware there are risks that we have to manage with you, because that type of borrowing is only available for 12 months. That doesn't work if you've got two bricklayers in a van laying bricks for the next 12 months. It doesn't work from a term perspective. But as AC and as architects, and many of the customers do using offsite manufacturing, the build program could be between 4 and 6 months. That is then far more palatable. Just 6 months to sell the current house. And of course, many customers have some of the funds to part build, and we use the funding for even shorter periods of time to complete it. So be aware there's a short-term solution for that marketplace that's moving towards retirement. So what's the key to a successful project? Well, I think it's fair to say that we have to set the budget nice and early, share that budget with your architects so they're designing some stunning properties, as we see, brought to the table every week, and ensuring that the right money's at the right time in the right place. It will enhance your relationship with your building contractors, your manufacturers, and it will take much of the stress out of the project. In terms of the support BuildStore provide their customers, the journey that we have can be a journey that lasts 2 to 3 years, from a very early embryonic stage of setting that budget as you go off and look for projects and a plot or a property to renovate, actually providing you with advice and taking you through the mortgage process. An important stages that we build into that to de-risk it is analysing the build costs. We have a team of independent build specialists who do that to make sure the costs are right. We're then modelling and tailoring that cash flow so that you know what you're receiving at every single stage. That's really important, again, take risk out of it, and ensure that you've got certainty. Once the build is completed, of course, we're going to be advising you as an independent mortgage specialist what your long-term mortgage strategy should be going forward beyond the actual build program itself. Why work with us? Well, 25 years old this year. There is a huge amount of knowledge and expertise, and as an organisation, we've been the UK's leading specialist in this market for many, many years. We do distribute exclusively. Somewhere around 75% of the lenders that fund in the sector exclusively. We are the distribution channel for the lender, as well as being a specialist advisor. And of course, competitive interest rates. And it's interesting because I haven't mentioned interest rates as part of a finance stock. And it's not that I don't care about interest rates, just as a miserable Scotsman, I care about interest rates. However, they are secondary to cash flow. No point in getting an attractive interest rate if the funds don't arrive on site and the project stalls. What we will focus on is ensuring that the cash flow meets your project, then find the most competitive interest rate. And I don't think there's been a better time for anyone to commission their own home. If we look back 2 years when the residential market was circa 1.5% interest rates, and the self-build market was around 5%. There was quite a gap between those. Well, what's happened now is because of the base rate, the residential market's up near that 5.25%, 5.5%, but the building societies don't track the Bank of England base rate. They discount or add to their standard variable rate. And the self-build rates are about 6 to 7%. So the gap between the two has narrowed dramatically. The next box, we will see that what we have is a concession from all of our partners that it's an interest-only mortgage during the purchase and the construction, and you only pay for what you draw down at each stage. That interest-only concession brings the cost monthly down considerably. Guaranteed stage payments, tailored cash flow, and a huge amount of experience. At any given time, we can have up to 1,500 projects in the ground that we're supporting, because it's us that will be doing the stage releases all the way through. It's not about organising a mortgage, it's about completing the project with you. So from that embryonic setting the budget to your build completion, we're here to support you at every single step. And we have an ongoing support process that takes you through that build monitoring to ensure that you're getting that advanced level of support that you need. So, you can see here, if you want to speak to the team, you can QR code scan. Those of you that are looking for lands, then there's a database that we have, Plot Search. It's a free database for anyone to search, get the budget set, find the plot of lands. You can, of course, access the brochures here.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tom. So there was a lot of really important information in that presentation, Tom, that, you know, it talks about how funding really is specific to the self-build process if you're going to go out and fund your project rather than just having cash. But a lot of us don't have the benefit of a big pile of cash. While we're waiting for a few questions to come in, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about replacement dwellings and any specific considerations you might have for those. We have quite a few clients and potential clients who, you know, wish to knock down a building and build in its place.
Yes, there are some very specific considerations, Jenny, and I don't think there's a month goes past when we don't have someone phoning up want to talk about a knockdown rebuild. Ironically, discovering there's still a mortgage on the site, although there's a house been knocked down. There's a process again that should be followed. Many people will buy a house with the long-term goal to knock it down and rebuild. What you have to consider is what mortgage will be in place when you buy it, because the day that you want to knock it down, that high street lender that's on that property, if there is a lender, needs to be removed on day one. Please don't demolish the house. They gave you a mortgage on a house, not a plot. But if it's unencumbered, then effectively we are lending against the land value. If there is a mortgage on it, we go back to the presentation, the lender will give us 95% to buy and 95% to build. That means whatever the plot value is post demolition, we can release up to 95% of that land value, which can go towards paying off the current lender. So there is a lender there. We can pay them off with the first stage drawdown, and then fund the build through stage payments. But it's important to realise that it's not the value of the house that's there, it's the value of the plot that we're lending against, because we're going to be demolishing that house. So it can be treated almost like a purchase, or it can be a purchase when it's you're buying it with the plan if you actually knock it down and build it. But if you own it and you want to knock it down and rebuild it, then we have to ensure that the plot value isn't significantly less than the actual debt that's on it. So we can remove the debt through the stage payment mortgage.
Great, thank you very much. What you talked a bit about warranty and site insurance. Can you just talk a little bit more again? I think there are probably people that don't understand sort of pulling those things together in terms of the building control and the review on site and how that links to the site insurance.
It's a very important part, Jenny. This is often the dream home, often the final home, and you're investing a considerable amount of time, effort, and funds into it. So it's important that we protect that asset. So from the point of purchase, then taking ownership, there should be a site insurance policy put in place. Because we don't have a house, it's not buildings and contents. And that site insurance policy can provide cover for public liability, employer liability, and of course will form the insurance for the building as it starts to form as a building. So that's the insurance element of it. And it's quite a specific figure that we need to cover. I spoke about the value of telling us the plot value on day one and the end value based on the drawings and plans. It will also give us the reinstatement value. That's the level of site insurance that needs to be in place. And if you think of that catastrophic or worst case scenario, where the house has to be demolished, but it's almost completed, the site insurance is there to fund a replacement dwelling using a main contractor. So the cover is often slightly higher than people expect, particularly if they're doing some of the work themselves. They might discount the cost of the build. This is to put a developer in, contractor to replace it. So that's important. Equally important that there's a suitable 10-year structural warranty or architect certificate. You're not buying a house off a volume house builder who's going to provide you with a national house builder certificate. This sector puts its own product in place. So that's a 10-year structural warranty. Slightly different in Scotland to England. In England, they deregulated the building control function. So your warranty provider, you're the architect can go to, and you can go, the client can go directly to their warranty provider to provide a 10-year guarantee and to do the building regulations, which means you've got one inspector coming out doing both jobs on site the same day. Now, that can be less expensive, and it certainly will speed up the process because you don't have two separate professionals and both having to do their component part before the next stage release. That warranty provider is important on the journey because that's who'll sign the stage payment for the mortgage to say that the previous stage has been satisfactorily completed. That comes into us and triggers the next stage release. So that is a process where the warranty provider is involved from the start to the end of the project, and the policy goes live when the building's complete. At that point, you have your 10-year guarantee, and you will replace your site insurance policy with a standard buildings and contents policy because the project's now completed. That's a service that we provide to all of our clients because when the valuation's carried out, we then know the level of site insurance that's needed.
Alan, did you have any questions you wanted to ask of Tom?
Hey Tom, thanks for that.
Well,
no, it's just a follow on with the warranty as well. That's something we often hear from clients. Well, it's my forever home. I don't need to get 10-year cover. I think nobody has any idea what's going to happen in the next 10 years, and you can often find yourself not passing on an asset but a liability to friends and family if the worst happens. And from our point of view as the professionals that are going out checking the works, it's another person that's going out and checking to see if everything's been built properly. And the inspectors are tough, so, and which is what you want. You want somebody to pick up issues. You want to find out there's a problem before you finish the build so that it can be rectified and doesn't cause long-term damage. So I would urge everybody to get a 10-year warranty before they start work on site.
Yeah. Alan's a really good point. And over the last 18 months, when there's been a fairly unprecedented rise in building materials that were beyond where anyone could foresee, and increased in labour costs, people who originally started a project thinking they would complete it with cash, coming to us saying, "Oh, actually, I need 100,000 to finish it, and I'm past wind and watertight," and didn't put a warranty in place because they didn't have a mortgage and no one was telling them. So it then becomes a retrospective position, which can be very expensive and far more problematic. I think it's also worth highlighting those of you, in fact, AC Architects helped me on the most recent the property I live in, my family home. The work that I did most recently, you run the risk on a renovation or an extension of invalidating your buildings and contents insurance. You're turning your house into a building site. That's not what they're insured. They were insuring a completed house. So don't put yourself in a position where there's an electrical fire and they discover the scaffolding and won't pay out. You can put your site insurance in place to replace your buildings and contents whilst you're doing home improvements, then putting your buildings and contents back in place once it's finished.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think just what we speak to a lot of clients very early on and do free evaluations to try and make sure that their project is right for them, right for the site. What level of information do BuildStore need to be able to do that first chat with somebody to make it meaningful?
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because I will go back to the flexibility that these building societies provide us. They will provide the support to buy the land with outline planning permission. Now, quite clearly at that stage, there aren't engineering drawings. What there are floor plans and elevations. We have an independent build team who, of course, can do a cost and service, but working with your architect, then it's important that we have a responsible set of build costs along with the plot purchase price. Now, with 28,000 under our belt, we've a pretty good idea what it costs. Don't come and tell me you're going to be building your house for £900 a square metre, or on an H-shaped building it's 1,200 because it's far more complicated. What we'll do is look and work with the client at an early stage that the build costs are responsible. So we'll know the land price. We can work on our parameters in terms of what that type of house is going to cost to build. And because at an early stage we can do it without marking the client's credit file, we can give them a really good understanding of their borrowing potential and therefore their budget. That can then be allocated to the land. We need to look at the professional fees because those are fees that are going to bring this project to life. Architect, engineer, site investigation, planning, building regulations, site insurance, structural warranty. Don't include that pot of money in your build cost or you'll run short in the build. You need to allocate sufficient funds, but we'll talk to you about that to then ensure that what you're left with is a sensible pot of money that your architects can then design a house on that budget. But contingency is important.
Yeah, and that is really important. And also the architectural fees, the total fees for your project might be 10, 12% of your construction cost. And please don't confuse your budget with the construction cost, because what you want to build it for and what it actually costs to build it can often be very different. So we need to make sure that it is a realistic cost that we're all working to from day one. I think just there was a sort of follow-on question in the Q&A. If I finance the land as well as the build, am I at more risk of being in negative equity when the build is complete?
Well, ask me that again so I can work out exactly.
So, if I finance the land as well as the build, am I at more risk of being negative equity when the build is complete?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's look what tends to happen as a sector. As a self-builder, we don't do this for profit, is the first thing quite often, but you will naturally build in most cases, more of an equity slice than you would if you were buying a house off the shelf. Buying a house off the shelf, your deposit is the level of equity in the house. The greater level of input you have on the project, the bigger the slice of the equity will be, because effectively you're removing 20% developer's profit, and that's passed on directly. Going back, it was a third, and a third. I don't think that's as relevant anymore, but certainly securing a plot of land And actually, there's a couple of really important points to pick up on here. I did mention all of those professional fees, which actually sounds like it's a bit of a disadvantage. Let's not lose sight of the fact that you're going to have a house that's bespoke designed for you. It's likely to save you an absolute living fortune over the lifetime of the property. That property designed up and off the around very quickly. That makes money, doesn't it?
Yeah, he makes a, and again, he got in at the right time and he got the good RHI and everything else. But still, we are designing homes that if you think at the moment it's costing you a small fortune to heat, and imagine you only cost you 10 or 20% of that 80% is money that you can use elsewhere. And I think, Tom, we've had this conversation before. If it's a retiring couple, that's money that can actually go into that can deal with outgoings.
Well, absolutely. If your income's been down, we can't put it up. What can we do? We can save money. But there are two other component parts that help that equity position. If you're buying a plot of land, there's the site Alan that we worked on down in Allen Park. When I looked at some examples, a plot purchase price at $500,000, the stamp duty is $12,500. The stamp duty on the finished house is $81,500. So that savings is effectively sitting as equity. And of course, one of the major benefits that self-build have is that it is exempt from VAT. So if and again, there's some industry experts that can help their clients with this particular area. However, at the end of the build, I think it's just changed actually, but previously it was 90 days from completion of the build to reclaim the VAT on materials that you've purchased. And of course, your contractors shouldn't charge you VAT because it's exempt on self-build. And of course, from conversions and renovations, there are some rules when you can get a reduced VAT down to 5%. So yeah, all of those areas will add equity into the project because that dump of money that comes in for the revenue at the end can go into the mortgage to bring it down. So there are some real advantages beyond. As I said, I don't think there's been a better time to self-build your own home.
I think there's one on asking about reduced rates for low energy homes. I think that's obviously we've touched on the reduced running costs, but I believe that there are some products out there that will save you money during that build route, that build phase.
Yeah, so we have created products. I mean, the green agenda is an important one moving forward, and I think it's really important that we get these products right long term. We have products just now that we have an exclusive product with Furness, and what they have is if you're spending additional funds on items like ground source heat pump, solar thermal PV, mechanical heat ventilation system, they have a cashback product that helps you cover the cost of some of these additional materials. Some lenders focus on a forecast on the EPC, where you'll get a discount afterwards. I think what's really important is ensuring you're getting that independent advice, because don't be caught up on the short-term environmental product. If long-term is going to cost you, you're tied in for 2 years on a rate that's actually not attractive. So it's important, again, to take that independent advice. I think there is room for development, no doubt about the environmental aspect. I was asked to do a talk, Alan, last year on eco projects. And as I was preparing to write the presentation, every one of our lenders lends on eco projects. You know, you can have a passive house, and it would be nothing more than vanilla to every self-build lender. You know, what's happened is the fabric first approach, which I've listened to you speak at many events, Alan, and that fabric first approach, where we can make a property airtight and fit it with a set of lungs and run it very inexpensively. Every one of our lenders will do that. What's important, right back to the presentation, is what do we wrap the building in? Be aware of the choice, be aware of the materials that you're adding to it, and ensuring that it's got proper accreditation and guarantees.
Yeah, I think just following on to that, the question about, is there any issues with financing modern methods of construction?
No, the superstructures have got incredible support from the building sites, whether that's timber frame. You know, we keep hearing that phrase, modern method construction. Goodness, we've been building with timber and oak for centuries. But certainly the likes of structural insulated panels, all of BuildStore's lenders will support them. insulated concrete form, and you're not charged a premium because you're using an off-site manufactured system. It's some of the myths that are peddled around that you'll pay more if you use certain products. It's just simply not the case.
I think from our point of view, it's just making sure that whoever you choose is the right product for you, for the design, for the site, that you work with somebody that you trust, that's got good payment terms, that you get on with, and if they have timber frame, if it's STA assured, they've got some BBA or BRE certification, something that helps you. Yeah, makes a big difference, and it really just means that they've spent the time and the money back in their system, and it's a good thing to have.
If you think of your project, I mean, ultimately there's going to be a valuer going out who's independent from the lender, and they're looking at the quality of the project and the materials that will be part of that. So there's some great lightweight materials now where a structurally insulated panel might have a batten and a board, which has got a care end and a store end. There's no brick or block on it. It might be a composite material like Cedral or Hardy board. But these products have got BBA or BRE certification that lets us know the durability of them. So, think about these things. Speak to your architect from a technical point of view. And when we look at some of the more modern methods of roof materials, cedar roofs, flat roofs, EPDM, the lenders get focused on what's the guarantee. And does it have a 25-year durability guarantee on it? So think about the actual quality of the product that you're putting onto this, because this is a lifetime project.
Yeah, and I think we often find that with people might be struggling with budget, but they might still want to have that material or that grass roof, and they separate all the items, go to different trades, different contractors to do everything, and then suddenly they've lost that whole system guarantee. And if there is a leak, there is a problem, all that's going to happen is they're all just going to point to each other if they're still in business. And what we want is something that's a full in-to-out system with an insurance-backed guarantee rather than sitting on the business. Because if that business is gone or that subcontractor's gone to save you a little bit of money, the cost of making good that, or the consequential cost from that, is massive at a later date.
Yeah, and so, I think we're very fortunate in the UK in terms of, and we're probably either sides of the River Forth at the moment. I'm in South Queensferry, but not a million miles away. We have such a group of fantastic off-site manufacturers in Scotland and England and Wales. Yes, there are many people who go to Germany and Poland that equally brilliant systems, but we're very fortunate in terms of having companies with real longevity. And it's part of the research that you do. And speak to Alan and the team when you're looking at these manufacturers, because if they're a startup, well, what's their liquidity like? Have they gone bust in the last 2 or 3 years? Do your company's house checks, because when you're paying for something up front and it doesn't arrive until it's manufactured, make sure you're working with suppliers that are going to be there to supply them.
Yeah, exactly. Do your due diligence. Definitely. Yeah. It goes from architects, consultants, builders, everything. Do your research.
Financial advisor firms, absolutely.
100%. Yeah. One thing, Tom, that we get that can be a little bit of a challenge is clients who are looking to build in their back garden, and they've got, and we're all about trying to find interesting sites for people, not just going on a website and getting something that's got planning, actually creating an opportunity, and that's where a lot of people do back garden developments. What are the things to consider on that, given that they might have a mortgage on the overall, it's different title deeds, all this sort of stuff? Is there any pointers on that, Tom?
It's a great question, and it is quite a section of the market, and it is that retiring market quite often. We do have clients do it for profit, split the title, build and sell, or build and let, or an Airbnb. There are, that can be part, but quite often it's downsizing from that big house into something far better that suits them long term. Now, there are two different considerations. That house and garden's one title deed. If there's going to be two properties, at the right time, we need to split the title deeds, and that's carried out by your solicitor with land registry. Now, I think land registry might be having more problems in the UK planning system at the moment, because the time period it's taking to separate title deeds can be considerable. But there is a process that the solicitor can go through, separate the title, so you have a separate building plot from the current home, which means when you finish the new one, you can sell the current house because it has its own independent title. If there is a mortgage on the current house, there's a slightly separate journey to go through, which should be contacting the existing lender first. What they'll do is send out a valuer. They will effectively, you can mark out on the ground the part that you want to take away from the current house, the reduced garden space, and they will revalue the current house with the reduced garden. It can have little or no impact because, particularly prior to it having planning, it's just garden space. If it does create a reduction, all the lender wants to know is, has the reduced value had an impact on their current mortgage? So if your mortgage product's a 75% loan-to-value product, by splitting the garden, have you brought your loan-to-value above that? If so, they'll ask you to make a small payment to reduce it back down in line with the product. The vast majority of instances, it will make no difference. And at that point, you will be given confirmation from the lender that you can separate your title. You then engage with your solicitor, who will go to land registry and remove the first charge from the garden spot and leave it on the current house with the reduced garden, freeing up that plot of land. Now, when that plot of land then obtains planning permission, of course, it has a considerable value. So go through the journey the right way. Don't go spending vast sums of money to discover that actually you can't split it and it's not feasible. So take advice nice and early. We can guide you on it. Separate the title, create the two separate parcels. And even if there's a payment to be made, then the self-build mortgage that we can organise, the state-funding lease, can be to make that payment. So again, engage with us nice and early on the journey. That's a really viable opportunity. And of course, rather than having to pay for a plot of land, you've effectively created a parcel of land with planning through that we're creating this. If land registry are creating for us, if we're organising a mortgage, then your solicitor can expedite that change to title because effectively you would suffer a financial hardship as a result of their inactivity. So if we need to drive that to happen quickly whilst we're organising the mortgage, it will give the solicitor the tools to do that.
Excellent. I think that's us, Jenny. I think that's all the questions.
So that was fantastic, Tom. That was a lot of really, really good information that we covered in a fairly short period of time. So thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to summarize with the top takeaways that I jotted down during your presentation. And the first is to really start by knowing how you're going to fund your project and how much you have to spend. That's key to getting started on your project. Know that your external material selection can affect your funding for your project and get ahead of that so you understand what effect it does have. And consider the particulars of your project. Not every self-build or extension build mortgage is right for you. So understand your particulars to make sure that you're choosing the best product for your project. And then finally, just put measures in place to minimize your risk and maintain control of the project throughout the build.
Yeah, that's
so with that, we've completed this self-build hour and the content. As a reminder, we will be uploading the recording to the website after with a bit of post-production. So in the next few days, that will be up and accessible to you so you can go back and revisit the information at your convenience. And we do have our next session scheduled. It is Thursday, the 11th of January, same time, 1 o'clock. And this time we'll be joined by Harvey Fremlin, who is the Managing Director of the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon. So we look forward to seeing you and keep any questions coming in. We're always looking for ideas of the next topic that you'd like to see featured on the Self-Build Hour.
And Jenny, thank you very much. Alan, thank you for inviting us on today, and hopefully it's been beneficial. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.